Hello, hello, hello. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, so thank you for your patience while we are in the process of arriving here. This session of Unlearning will get started in just a moment, so we're going to give our audience another couple of moments to find their way here. We hear that there was some sort of passcode issue happening. If you know somebody else who you thought was going to be here, you figured out how to get here, please send them a message. Please post it on your social media and let them know so that we can all arrive here, because we are not going to want to waste a moment of our time today. But we will practice patient urgency as well, because we're rebellious, I've been told. Grab your drinks, grab your, kombucha, grab your BLT. I don't know, I'm just saying that because that sounds really good right now. Whatever you need to be fully present here, and then we will get started in just a few moments. For those that are just joining us, we are slowly finding that people are trickling in as they navigate whatever this new Zoom update was that locked everybody out. Yay, we love technology. Yay, yay. Don't forget how much you love it. Otherwise, we would not be able to create this space together virtually from across so many states and countries. See what I did there? Just flipping that moment of frustration to remind you of the positive that is at the root of even that frustration. I'm frustrated I couldn't immediately get into the meeting, Lindsay. That is a virtual meeting that didn't exist 20 years ago. But we are here, we are coming, we are arriving. I think more people will find their way here, but let's go ahead and delve in. Welcome to your September session of Unlearning. I'm your host, Lindsay T.H. Jackson, and our topic today is Unlearning Hatred of Black Women, also called Misogynoir. As always, if this is your first time here, or if this has been your church home for a very long time, welcome, and a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to turn on those closed captions, just go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and there should be something there that says CC. You can activate those to run during the session. You can also alter the language of those closed captions if that would better serve your time in our space that we are in the process of co-creating. Live ASL interpretation will be offered throughout this entire session. If at for some moment in some time we have an interruption to that ASL, you will notice that we, to make sure that our entire audience can be present, can be accommodated for, can feel that their needs are important to our needs and our success in this moment. So I invite you to expand your ways of being and knowing. If you haven't read our community guidelines before, I invite you to do so or after today's session. Really important, the space that we are creating here. We are allowed to disagree, we are allowed to dissent, we are allowed to question, but we are not in the habit of calling people out and calling people off in this space. We will call people in, we will call on one another to be the midwife of somebody's growth. If that is a new concept for you, I invite you to check out Loretta J. Ross. I'm going to say it again, Loretta J. Ross's TED Talk, all about that. Best 20 minutes that you will spend today after the hour you're going to spend with me. So there's that. This is going to be recorded. I'm sorry, you're not all going to be on the recording. Only our panelists are going to be on the recording, unless at the end you open up your mic, come onto camera, and decide that you have a question. We will spotlight you and you will make it onto the recording. Otherwise, you are allowed to be on camera so that we can see your beautiful face, even if you're wearing your pajamas, even if you have crusty eyeballs, even if your hair is all astride and whatever. We love to see you, but just because we're seeing you does not mean you will be on that recording. At the end of our time, we invite you to participate in our reflection, give us your feedback, ask us your questions, let us know what is of top of mind to you and what you would like to see on Unlearning in the future. As always, our ASL is provided by Pro Bono ASL. Cannot stress enough what an amazing partner pro bono is in Unlearning, as well as across all of our endeavors at LTHJ Global. If you are looking to have wonderful ASL partners who can take your events and make them more accessible, we invite you to reach out to them and tell them that we sent you. Can we take a breath together, please? Let's take a breath together. Deep inhale in. Deep, messy exhale out. Let's welcome this panel. Jaya Malik is an experienced DEIB practitioner and educator. She centers her practice on community engagement, data-informed insights, and empowering others to lead and innovate. She is especially passionate about ensuring equal access and opportunities for women of color and other underrepresented identities. Prior to launching her coaching and consulting, she led DEI efforts at Meta, Amazon, Tandem Diabetes Care, with a focus on the tech industry, and as an expert in learning and development and K-12 educator, she is versed in teaching complex concepts to diverse audiences to ensure comprehension, connection, and action. Oh, we love that word, action. Jaya, welcome to the virtual stage. How are you, babe?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, let's just take a moment and tell everybody how we met and became BFF for life. Uh, Unbeknownst to everybody, but you and Jaya and I found ourselves at the Miss Teen Washington pageant earlier in the as celebrity judges. And we took that very seriously.
We did.
Seriously at moments.
That's right. We found each other unexpectedly at the Miss Washington teen pageant. And immediately I felt a connection to you, Lindsay, as another soul sister. And we immediately got down to the business of very rigorously immersing ourselves in our judging duties and ensuring that it was equitable and inclusive and as unbiased as possible. And in the process of that, also building a really incredible friendship. So I am so thankful that I've met Lindsay and that you're in my life. And I'm also just so grateful that we get to be here together and just share the joys of this work that we do, both being social justice advocates and very passionate about this work, but also just getting to be moms and swap stories of like, what's the wild thing your kid did today? So I'm so grateful to be in this space. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And for all the women of color on the call, you know that our relationship started with a look kind of like this.
You know, that's right. That side eye.
Yes. Dr. Eliana Ramirez, PhD, LISW, is a clinical social worker, coach, and researcher specializing in racial and anti-LGBTQIA++ workplace trauma. Her expertise includes employee self-defense in toxic workplaces, workplace trauma recovery, racial battle fatigue, post-traumatic growth, workforce wellness, culturally responsive suicide prevention, somatic anti-racist, trauma recovery, say more, and LGBTQIA++ liberty, harm reduction, and Chicana feminist queer theory. Her work addresses the impacts of racism, anti-LGBT QIA bias, sexism, classism, stigmatism, and institutional betrayal on the physical and mental health of civilian workforces and military service members. Dr. Eliana, first of all, everybody now wants you to be their therapist because you basically just went through the roster of what we're dealing with every day. But welcome to the virtual couch. How are you? Oh, come off of mute for me.
I'm so grateful to be here, Lindsay. Thank you for the invitation. Can you hear me okay now?
Now.
Great. It's such an honor to be on this panel with such distinguished speakers. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here, and so excited to talk about the recent work that Jaya and you partnered on, which led to our introduction. Everybody's just gonna eat that up. But first, you've seen her before, and you've asked us repeatedly to see her again. Let's all welcome the great Robin Force Counts. As you know, Robin's research is at the center, at the life beating core of so much of the work that we do. Born in a time and place where multiple forms of diversity and difference were normal and normalized, Robin Force Counts is a white, cisgender, female-identified facilitator and researcher with unending curiosity, I can +1 that, about the human experience and anti-oppression. Her life was shaped by the soul satisfying times of the 80s and 90s hip hop, which led her to attain a degree in peace studies and restorative justice in Nambia in 1994 during their second democratic election. Since then, Robin's work has included 24 years in the technology sector, social services and support of youth and creativity, and writing for a hip hop magazine. She lives on multiple continents and contexts and is a welder of metal art. Welcome, Robin Force Counts, to the virtual couch. How are you?
I'm so good and just so honored. Eliana, Dr. Eliana said the same word, but I'm just really honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is Lindsay. Friends, let's delve in because we're talking about Misogynoir, which on one hand seems like it should be like some super cool French film, you know, like indie thing that everybody's secretly into, and it's kind of like niche, and we have special clothes that we wear and smoke cigarettes or something, but it's not. It's actually the hatred of Black women, to be very clear and just put a point to it. But before we delve into that and explaining more about what that is, I wanted to read this poem by one of our great Black grandmothers, Maya Angelou. Some of you may know who Dr. Maya Angelou is, and some of you, I'm looking at your face and I can tell that you're too damn young, which we'll take that offline and have that conversation. But this poem is called Our Grandmothers. She lay, skin down on the moist dirt, the canebrake rustling with the whispers of leaves, loud longing of hounds, and the ransack of hunters crackling the near branches. She muttered, lifting her head and nod toward freedom, I shall not be moved. She gathered her babies, their tears slick as oil on Black faces, their young eyes canvassing mornings of madness. Mama, is Master going to sell you from us tomorrow? Yes. Unless you keep walking more and talking less. Yes. Unless the keeper of our lives releases me from all commandments. Yes. And your lives, never mine to live, will be executed upon the killing floor of innocence. Unless you match my heart in words, saying with me, I shall not be moved. In Virginia tobacco fields, leaning into the curve of Steinway pianos along Arkansas roads in the red hills of Georgia, into the palms of her chained hands, she cried against calamity. You have destroyed me, and though I perish daily, I shall not be moved. Her universe, often summarized into one Black body falling finally from the tree to her feet, made her cry each time in a new voice. All my past hastens to defeat, and strangers claim the glory of my love. Iniquity has been bound to me in this bed, yet I must not be moved. She heard the names swirl ribbons in the wind of history, nigger, nigger bitch, heifer, mammy, property, creature, ape, baboon, whore, hot tail, thing. She said, but my description cannot fit your tongue, for I have a certain way of being in this world, and I shall not be moved. No angle stretched, protecting wings above the heads of her children, fluttering and urging the winds of reason into the confusion of their lives. They sprouted like young weeds, but she could not shield their growth from the grinding blades of ignorance, nor shape them into symbolic topiaries. She sent them away, underground, over land, in coaches and shoeless. When you learn, teach. When you get, give. As for me, I shall not be moved. She stood in mid-ocean, seeking dry land. She searched God's face, assured. She placed her fire of service on the altar, and though clothed in the finery of faith, when she appeared at the temple door, no sign welcomed. Black grandmother, enter here. Into the crashing sound, into wickedness, she cried, no one, no, nor no 1 million ones dare deny me, God. I go forth alone and stand as 10,000. The divine upon my right impels me to pull forever at the latch on freedom's gate. The Holy Spirit upon my left leads my feet without ceasing into the camp of the righteous and into the tents of the free, for I shall not be moved. I think it's important when we start a conversation to understand when we speak of Black women, we speak of a people who were treated like chattel. It goes beyond having no body autonomy. It is, they were bred like we breed cows and chickens and pork and oh, Dr. Eliana, what is misogynoir?
Misogynoir is a term that was created by Dr. Moya Bailey in 2008 in her dissertation. It is a term that is talking about the intersection of racism, specifically anti-blackness and sexism towards Black women in the media. And we're seeing an increase of it right now with Vice President Kamala Harris's nomination for president.
Is it something that only white men embody or act out?
Horrifyingly enough, anyone can engage in misogynoir. Women of color engage in misogynoir against Black women. Sometimes Black men engage in misogynoir towards Black women.
This is Lindsay. So misogynoir is an equal opportunity lover. It's like anybody can choose me.
This is Eliana. It is a horrifying truth. I think that it was Malcolm X who said that the most despised woman in America is a Black woman. I didn't quote that directly, but I think that this is, misogynoir gets to that point, that Black women have been so horribly treated throughout history in what's now the United States, and it continues on today.
This is Lindsay. But Jaya, so I hear what Dr. Eliana is saying, and then I'm like, no, that can't still be. Like, we have Beyonce, we have Rihanna, we have Oprah. These are billionaires. We can't still have a problem with Black women in this society. What do you say to that?
This is Jaya. And, I think that we tend to look towards these examples in society as almost like tokenized examples of success, examples of Black women being successful in society. And while we should not discount their examples of success because they are successful in their own right, anti-Blackness as a fundamental concept is pervasive. It's rooted on a global scale. In many societies, and to Eliana's point, that, I think misogynoir is something that can be practiced by anybody. It's not limited to particularly just like say white men are the only people who are guilty of practicing misogynoir. I think anti-Blackness is so deeply embedded within the American context and within American society, that it really is, we point to these like 1% examples, but the daily experience that I believe, and from what, the stories that have been shared and what we see in research and what we talk about often, is that the daily experience for many Black women, that isn't the reality. The reality is that they're dealing with microaggressions or flat out aggression on the daily. They're dealing with discrimination in their workplace and in the community. And they're dealing with absence of allyship in all of these contexts.
Yeah, this is Lindsay. Robin, can you build on what Jaya said in terms of what are some of these subtle instances of how this plays out? What does it look like in the workplace? What does it look like in the grocery store?
Yeah, looking through the booklet that the two of you created, Dr. Eliana and Jaya, like there's lots of examples, and you've done some research here, so I want to just honor that and try to build on it. Not that it needs building on, but just to add, I mean, I think we're saying it's unconscious in a lot of cases, and it's institutional and systemic. So we're seeing individuals experience systems making life harder, and individuals making life harder, and people not wanting to be accountable for it, like because it's built into our culture. It's Dr. Maya's poem speaks to a time when our country was being founded. Our country was founded on these principles of hierarchy and treating some people better than others. And Black women, by definition, have more, talk about target and agent ranks, more identities in the target ranks. So less agency by definition, objectively, and then how we experience the world, in addition to other forms of oppression, adds to that. And the way that other people are interpreting the world and their experience with anti-Blackness and Black women and all of that, like it's as I can witness and speak to, it's an adjacent, or it's just a constant, the word is failing me, but I can see that you feel it. It's constant. But I think I didn't totally answer the question, Lindsay. You're asking about examples in the workplace. And I want to say, I have interviewed and spoken to many people about and witnessed many issues in workplaces in my 25 years in tech as well. And the examples are specific to individuals, and they speak all the way to, the wage gaps, like just all the ways that oppression acts out institutionally, and then also in our relationships. Can I trust you? I'm finishing a book right now. It's called Do Better, Rachel Ricketts, and she's speaking to, there's some parts about white women and the ways that we act out this systemic oppression that we've learned. And it's just one of many examples of the lists and lists, and the lists are not the point. Like, we're experiencing it in everything we do. Oh, I just spoke way too long. Thank you.
This is Lindsay. I'll ask for the time back if I thought you were speaking too long. I mean, I think all three of you are opening this up in such a, I'll say, a beautiful way, because there's such breadth to it, right? We're talking about racism, which we could spend a year just covering that topic. And then we're talking about sexism and patriarchy and misogyny. And we can spend a year just talking about that. And then obviously, if we were to introduce even more intersectional identities, what would it be to be a Black trans woman? What would it be to be a Black trans disabled woman, right? All of the ways that when we think of this term intersectionality and the ways that these identities overlap with one another, it's the gift that just keeps on giving. It's, you're experiencing one type of oppression, and then here comes another one. And what's interesting in that, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is the ways that often in solidarity with other women, in particular when we talk about Black women and white women, or Black women and women of color, we tend to see that those ways, as Robin is naming, that we have been taught to normalize oppression, we continue to push Black women out to the margins because in my non-Black identity, because of racism, I get some sort of privilege, right? I can choose whiteness even though I'm a woman. I can choose my Asian identity even though I'm a woman, Latinx, right? Jaya, say more about that. What's coming up for you?
Oh, so much. So let me see if I can try and unpack it in my own brain. So, I think that, I'm thinking a lot, especially to even the current election cycle that we're in right now. Something that's been very disheartening for me to see has been sort of the infighting that I have seen, especially around Kamala Harris and the positionality around the Israel-Palestine conflict. And what I think that people are, there are, I think, pockets where there's a lot of passion and advocacy, rightfully so, to advocate for a ceasefire, for the people that are in Gaza. And then also folks that are saying that you shouldn't vote for her because she's not really advocating for the ceasefire. And then you have folks that are primarily within the Black community, and specifically Black women that have been very much mobilized and are really energized by her being on the ticket. And there being a lot of infighting between the two groups. And so it coming down to like it looking like a single issue vote. And that infighting has been really really disheartening for me to see. And where I feel a pull, too, in the sense that I really heavily relate in one way to the Palestinian conflict. My family were survivors of the India-Pakistan partition in 1947. They're very connected. The two conflict areas are very connected. There's a lot of shared history between the two. And so I do feel a very strong pull to what is happening in Palestine right now. And I also understand why people are feeling very energized around Kamala Harris and why the Black women are especially mobilized around Kamala Harris. And I don't really agree with people sort of demonizing that, or, I've seen, especially on social media, some Black women be attacked for their support or rallying for support around her. And part of me feels like that is misogynoir in action, because it's, I think that oftentimes Black women are the first to be attacked in social media settings. And I do think that's misogynoir in action. And I'm wondering, do the people who are advocating for more like causes around Palestine even recognize that they're doing it in real time? I've seen quite a few like high profile conflicts take place, but they're not recognizing that they do have this relative positionality or privilege based on their ethnicity, versus, say, a Black woman in America, where we're not looking at the context or the relative history of America to see, why would she really care about this? Why would she want to vote and support this particular candidate who resonates with her, where she shares identity with her, who may vote in her interests that are important to her domestically? And so this is sort of like like I'm taking like a really windy path here with this answer, but I feel like that is sort of like that to what you're speaking about, Lindsay, that it's like, I think that folks that are able to like really support that Palestinian conflict, it's not like a binary. We can't exist in these binaries where it's like either you support it or you don't. Either you vote for her and you're like supporting the genocide, and it's like you're in this like one bucket or you're not. Like everything is not so like zeros and ones. You know what I mean? It's not like so simple. And so, but I do, one thing that has been really, I think, disturbing for me to see has been specifically the attacks that I see on Black women in social media. I would like to, I would really like to like kind of dig into that deeper, because, like Eliana was mentioning earlier. Thanks for the wine. Thanks for the support of the winding path answer. But you know, as Eliana was mentioning earlier, like we did, as you know, Eliana put out this beautifully designed survey that supported the guide that we got to work on together. And in that, we were seeing this uptick of misogynoir around this time. We do have this conflict abroad that is complicating the factors. And sometimes I think that when we don't share the identity of being Black, that we sometimes don't see our own unconscious bias that's so deeply entrenched within the systems or in the societies we live in. And so it is our responsibility to kind of unpack what's causing the reactions that we have.
Mm. This is Lindsay. 500 things. Of all of that, everybody grab out your pens and write this down, right? That that type of binary thinking is a privileged thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That sort of black and white, right and wrong is, if you are on an issue, wow, what fantastic privilege you have in this world. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let you marinate on that for the next 25 years. And when you understand that, you come back and you talk to me. Eliana, something's coming up for you. I see it on the tips of your tongue. What's coming up?
I'm thinking about how we as non-Black people, how we as non-women, how we as anyone who is not a Black woman and who is seeing these conversations happen on LinkedIn, on other social media, what we say or what we do matters. And that's what we heard from a survey of 26 Black women on LinkedIn asking, essentially, what are your experiences when people try to be allies and it causes harm or it actually helps? Because what we were seeing in 2020, especially at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, is people doing things that they thought were trying to be helpful, trying to be an ally, but actually caused a heck of a lot of harm. So we saw white women posting pictures of themselves in bikinis on social media that said, ha, made you look, now that you're looking, hashtag BLM. And that was a grotesque, I'll just say it, that was a grotesque opportunism to get people to look at their bodies. And using hashtag BLM as a cutesy way to, I mean, it was so disgusting. I in polite company, I cannot say the words that I am actually thinking right now. So I'll just leave it to your imagination.
Not in polite company.
But what happened, I mean, I might even go there in Spanish, okay? You did say that I could flip it up a little bit, but anyway, okay. The thing is now that we're in this time, what are we doing when we see Black women being demonized, being hurt, being cast out of jobs, not being promoted, being spoken over in meetings, people stealing ideas and so on? What are we doing? And what we heard from the 26 Black women who completed our survey, 81% said, if misogynoir is noticed in a social media space, they want the person who witnesses it to say, that is inappropriate, that's gross, don't do it, stop it. They want somebody to say something, 81%. 66% said that they wanted the person to report that post up to LinkedIn to have it removed. 49% said they want the person who witnesses to reach out to them privately and say, this is how I'm thinking about responding. Do you want me to do this, or would you rather me do something else? Guess how many people said they want the witness to do nothing? 0%. 0% of Black women said do nothing. And part of the way that misogynoir will function in us who are witnesses is we'll get a little bit like, you know, I don't want to come off the wrong way. I don't want to come off like a savior when I'm really just trying to be helpful. Or I don't want to, you know, everybody else is seeing this, so I'm not going to do anything to get that bystander bias. And I think what we realize is how important it is. We're going to screw up in our attempts to interrupt misogynoir. We're going to screw up sometimes. And the way to aspire toward allyship is to receive that feedback, not crumble and freak out and cry and everything like that, but stay focused on the person who experienced harm from our good intentions and then do better in the future. I think that was another windy path.
Thank you, Winding Path. This is Lindsay. But, you know, as you all are naming this, and Robin, we've talked about this a lot, and so I'm going to ask you to share here. I think one of the ways that misogynoir shows up is the assumption that Black women are strong enough to handle it themselves. Say more.
Are you passing the mic? Okay, this is Robin. Yeah, I think so. There is a journey that we're on in relationship to different identities. And so as we learn about a form of oppression and how we relate, I have a visual in my mind that I'm trying to speak to, and I'm not sure if it's coming across, but like, if I am new to understanding the oppression that the Black women identity has faced over the years, if I'm new to that, I might feel some need to show that I know about that and I know, or it's not new to me. Like I want to do all these things that are for my ego, that are performance-based, that make me feel better. But that doesn't help. In fact, we know that that makes it harmful, because then when people tell you that you did it wrong, then your feelings are hurt and you're like, hey, I was trying, and there's a whole set of dynamics there. The example I usually give is the mom, Black women, sorry, I'm not saying it clearly and I'm not apologizing. When Black Lives Matter was in Portland in particular, there was like a set of white moms who just named themselves moms, as if Black women couldn't be moms, and they were trying to get in front of the police, but they didn't work in partnership with Black women or Black Lives Matter. They just came and said, we're allies. It's this kind of corporatization of this ally word. Like, turns out if I don't get to call myself an ally, and I shouldn't be attempting to ally for someone, if it's a verb, without a relationship or permission or respect. That's what I hear from the data that you're sharing and from the data that I've gathered as well. Like, it's not that you jump in and try to save someone. No one needs your saving. Like, we have voices. The problem is systemic. So in what ways can we support so that it's not taking from the person we're trying to support? And that means relationships and having a community that helps you unpack things, that doesn't put more burden on the people you're trying to support, and having like a spiritual center and knowing that you're enough even when you make mistakes. I don't have more of the list fresh in my head, but they're written in many places. And Lindsay, did I answer the question?
Yeah, this is Lindsay. It's this realization, this constant teasing apart that I hear all three of you naming, that I think is the challenge with misogynoir, or this ongoing low-grade hatred of Black women that we play out in our society, that is still new. We're still naming it. We're still just really seeing this on a national stage and, you know, in the political stage, in a way that we can start to have these complex conversations about it, right? We saw it with Justice Jackson, for example, during her interview process, very different than the justice right before her. She's being asked questions about, you know, her career, as though it's an anomaly that a Black woman would rise to that level as a justice. Meanwhile, her quote unquote peer is being asked questions about his sexual harassment, or, you know, the alleged harassment of a woman. These two things are not like the other, right? When we have, and I don't care what your politics are, that is such a blaring example of when you have convicted multiple, court cases open person next to somebody who were questioning decisions made in an otherwise like slowly built, effort filled career and advancement. We're asking, is she qualified to do a job? And you're looking at her peer, and somehow that peer is being considered on par with her. That is misogynoir at its most blatant and just clear form for us all to contend with. But then I think what is still so interesting is just the little ways that this shows up in our day-to-day relationships. One, Robin, I know you and I have talked about this, and Jaya, we've talked about this, is trust, right? For my girlfriends that I've had for, 20, 25 plus years, where we're working across race, it can be years into that relationship where I feel as though I can trust them enough to show my weakness, right? That's the misogynoir that leads to Black women dying at higher rates, to dying in childbirth, to having IBS, to having gallstones, to having ulcers. It's the amount of danger that you move through the world with, even in relationships with people that want to be close to you, but have no tools to be close to a Black woman. I see you all shaking your heads. Who wants to go first? Say more, Jaya.
Yes, this is Jaya. Yes, there's, again, so much to unpack, and my mind is going at a million miles an hour. I like the term that keeps coming up in my head as everybody is speaking, and what you were just saying, particularly Lindsay, around the physical problems that start to emerge, the health problems that start to emerge, is think of weathering, that weathering that occurs on a Black woman. It's not just their physical health, but their spirit, their heart, their psyche, because like the little ways that we see misogynoir show up in not just community, but in the workplace, are things like, doing the same or higher quality level of work and being passed off for promotion, having to deal with constant levels of microaggressions, having to constantly watch your facial features, listen to your voice tone and being judged for that, having to deal with comments about hair or having your hair touched, like these are all these like little, like it's like little cuts, which I know we refer to them, maybe more academically as microaggressions, but really it's these cuts that just, I think, wear people down over time. And we do expect, and I think I saw Tiara say in the chat, kind of like this strong Black woman, there's like this expectation to be a strong Black woman and kind of like do it alone. And that, but it's also, kind of circling back to the research that, and the survey and the things that we found in the survey, is that, a lot of times, like I find that Black women are left to sort of to fend alone and to have to protect themselves. So, this isn't out of like nowhere that, this idea of, I need to protect myself. I need to protect my heart. I need to protect my spirit. I need to protect my physical, my physical health, or like my physical safety. Those things don't come out of nowhere. Those aren't figments of imagination. This is from reality. A lot of times, and I have seen it. I've had women share with me, and I've had to support women through where they're left high and dry, frankly. And so I think a lot of that weathering and just like over time, like if you think about the span of, say, let's use a workplace, like a career of like 30, 40 years, where you're having to do that by yourself constantly and having to defend yourself constantly or protect yourself constantly. Like to me, that it's very logical that you are going to experience these issues of like physical ailments, like high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, like these things can literally lead to physical consequences, but also that you become less trusting of people around you. I would So I have, from my own experiences in the workplace. So, and I don't believe I've had it to the degree that I think many Black women have to experience. So that's my 2 cents.
This is Lindsay. You're still shaking your head, so I'm leaning back. I'm letting you who wants to go next? Dr. Eliana, Robin?
Sure, I can go. I really appreciate, Jaya, that you're speaking so directly about the health implications. And it makes me think about predominantly white institutions and how profoundly dangerous they are. There's some research about Black graduates of historically Black colleges and universities having 35% less metabolic illness than do graduates of predominantly white institutions. And this is after controlling for diet, for exercise, So what they are essentially finding is that the exhaustion, the extra energy that is required to just navigate these hostile environments releases stress hormone flooding, which over a continuous period of time in our bodies leads to system-wide inflammation that is the precursor for all of those illnesses that Jaya mentioned. This is nothing about weakness. This is nothing about thinking positively. You can't pray your way out of this kind of stuff. It is the natural impact that happens to any mammalian body that is exposed to that level of stress hormone. And it reminds me of the impossible situation that Black women are put in this country between the stereotypes on the one hand, Mammy, matriarch, Jezebel, all of the stereotypes, these very prescribed roles that Black women are required to stay within and not have any emotions, not have any thought, not have any movement or action in society or in families or what have you, that deviates from those roles. And yet at the same time, the stereotypes are the exact opposite as well. So for example, this idea of a strong Black woman, so Black women were forced to literally wet nurse white women's babies. And then at the same time, so ostensibly in control of the most precious parts of white society, white babies, but at the same time being referred to as, I'm not even gonna say all the words, but like, you would not expect that somebody would be given the duty of caring for the most precious part of a community if they really were all of the horrifying stereotypes that are said about Black women. So it's this impossible position to be in, and in the workplace, we see it all the time, where Black women are constantly being required to train somebody who's coming in to be their supervisor. They're never given that opportunity to be promoted themselves and have the expectation of indignancy to have to train this other person who's then going to be supervising them. It's an impossibility, which of course is going to manifest in the body, especially when Black women are not allowed to have any kind of facial expression other than smiling, because goddess forbid, a Black woman should have any feeling at all besides keeping white people feeling comfortable is too dangerous to this larger social order.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this example of a situation, just one example of a tech situation. I was on a call with 100 people. We were all doing status. Most of them were white people. And it was one Black woman's turn to give status. And her partner, who's a man calling in from Ireland, he talked over her and asked her questions. And it was something that we see in common. And I followed up with the DEI committee afterwards to speak to it. And I followed up with the woman, and she said, Robin, I didn't even know if that was really happening. Like, it's so common that I didn't know if it was real or imagined. And that I hear that all the time, like the hypervigilance. We have to perform, we have to manage our facial expressions, everything about our body language. We can't fit the stereotypes, and by we I mean Black women, so maybe I should change that up. There is this sense that we then have to compartmentalize, right? Like, you want me to be my whole self at work and tell me that we're family and tell me to to be authentic, but you don't really want my authenticity, because as soon as I stick up for my colleague, then I'm scapegoated and then I'm the problem. Anyway, I have so many examples of this, but I wanted to make sure we got back to this Black women as strength, and how that stereotype or that trope, you know, goes all the way back to wet nursing, and not allowing Black women to have feelings. Like in our culture, you are a body, but you know, we don't really want you to have feelings, because then will there be anger? You know, then insert stereotype here. And the expense, the physical and mental expense of stereotype threat, and not wanting to be what we think people think we are. And now if we're talking about Black women in mostly white institutions, it's, you know, in triplicate. Anyway, I think we've already spoken to that, but just trying to tie it all back.
Yeah, no, this is Lindsay. I see some people saying in the chat window, this can be triggering. And, you know, as a Black woman, I think I only started having feelings like 3 years ago. It's, you know, scary and fantastic. And in order to do that, I had to become the CEO of my own company. I had to be, you know, single mother, right? Like, you know, because now I have all the feelings, and we'll have that another session about that one day. You know, for each feeling I have to have a drink. But you know, this idea is so fascinating in this moment, because at the same time as we are constantly pushing Black women to the margins of our society, disenfranchising them, even so far as considering them not human altogether, what is this weird thing that we also look for them to rescue and save us again and again? Help me understand that. Why is it like we're like, oh, thank God somebody kept their eye on democracy. Oh, thank God somebody fed these damn babies and make sure that Billy Bob Joan knew that they were loved. You know, like, help me make sense of that. How can we both and there?
Dr. Eliana, I saw you leaning in. I just have thoughts. They're not totally articulate yet. I feel like there is a taking for granted, an expectation, and like Black women as the consciousness. Lindsay, this goes to our conversation about deification and fetishization, which I don't want to go into that realm, but like there's this unconscious, unspoken expectation that Black women will be there to insert stereotypes here, you know, to do the strong things, to save democracy, to, it feels very uncomfortable to say it out loud, to be the wet nurse, all of those things. There's just this taking for granted. Can you build on that? I think that was just a start.
I thought that was such an excellent start. That was so important. And I think that part of it is a recognition that by having to survive such extreme oppression, Black women oftentimes end up developing sensibilities, bodily wisdom, and a refusal to accept the status quo out of survival. It's not a cute in the fad kind of a decision. It's like, no, this is survival. And there's a recognition, at least on a somatic, on a body level, from people who are not Black women, that Black women, we hear people talk about Black women magic. We hear people talk about and seeing how Black women are oftentimes at the forefront of every major social movement in this country, right? There's a recognition that there is something, and I think part of it also is going back to that idea of having, it's a survival action, also having been cast out and cast aside in so many different ways. There is an individualism, ironically, that is the best of the individualism that's part of American mythology, right? But we actually see it in Black. So specifically, Black women are leading the nation right now of new entrepreneurs. If you look at all entrepreneurs, and we're seeing, across the board, people are saying workplaces are unhealthful, they are abusive, but if Black women are saying, ya basta, enough, I'm out of here, I'm gonna go create my own thing. And so there's something, but we see it also in art, we see it in ways of leadership, and it's so threatening to imposter leaders. I think that's what we see in the workplace, is that people who have been promoted up without the necessary skills, training, subject matter expertise find Black women who are naturally gifted, talented, interpersonally, great skills and so on. Those imposter leaders will find that Black woman as an existential threat. She's just showing up and doing her job, thanks very much. Minding her own business, just trying to get her job done. But that imposter leader will find her as an existential threat and therefore must annihilate her in some way or another from the workplace.
This is Lindsay. Fuck, Dr. Ramirez, you just described my dating life. What? We went deep. Jaya, you had a thought?
Oh man, I didn't expect to hear that.
Thank you, therapist. Takes note.
I have your card for after this. This is Jaya.
Covered by
This is Jaya. I also think that I believe that Robin and Dr. Eliana, you were both absolutely spot on in your observations and assessments. I also do believe that there is this beautiful individualism that exists amongst Black women that allows this creativity and abstract thinking to flow, because there has had to have been a resourcefulness when there are limits in resources or limits in access to opportunity. However, I also do love the collectivism in the community as well, that I believe that some of these movements that we're currently seeing, so for example, when we heard that Kamala Harris was going to be the presumptive nominee, immediately there was like this giant Zoom call, the millions of dollars raised, and I think it was like 3 hours, and that was off of an incredibly effective organizing effort. I think that some of that has come through intergenerational learning and wisdom of Black women. And I don't know anybody else that can do that better. And so I think that there's a mixture of collectivism and individualism, and it's a beautiful blend that happens amongst Black women that I haven't seen anybody else do that better. And so I think that those two things combined are actually what cause people to feel threatened by the greatness of Black women within workplaces. I think that's why we have these concepts of things like from pet to threat, where, for those of the folks that are on the call where they may not be familiar with this idea, it's this idea that, it was coined specifically around Black women, the idea that a Black woman that is a high performer in the workplace, who may be working for, say, a white supervisor or a white manager or leader, that they're, basically allowed to stay in that position and treated well until they're outperforming their superior. And then they are very quickly demonized or made the scapegoat or treated as an outcast until they're forced to leave the organization. This specifically happens at a higher prevalence or a higher rate with Black women. And so I think that concepts like pet to threat exist because I think that Black women do have this really unique blend of being able to organize and work together towards a common goal, but also have these unique characteristics and abilities that help them to individually shine.
Wow. This is Lindsay. Unfortunately, we are at that time where we need to release some of you who I know might have a meeting at the top of the hour, but we're going to stay on for a couple moments to invite people to ask questions of Dr. Ramirez, Robin, or Jaya. You can just open up your mic, or if you would like to pop it in the chat window, I am happy to read it aloud. What's coming up for you, community? Tiara?
Thank you, Dr. Lindsay. Thank you, everyone. I'm having a lot of feelings right now. But and I don't know where this question will go, but with the data, with the research, with the stories, where do we go from here? What can we, as Black women, how can we, I don't want to say internalize, but how can we deal with this trauma? And then how can others, I think we did mention, calling people in, not calling them out and speaking up, but I'm curious, what else have you guys seen that works? And little baby steps that we can be doing. Thank you.
Before the panel responds, I just want to, Tiara, I have not achieved doctorate level in anything yet. So I just want to make a correction.
I'm sorry,
But-
but not sorry. You portray it, and
Thank you for dropping that blessing so that can
there
be
you
my
go.
next decade. I
There we go.
Who could respond to Tiara's question first?
This is Jaya. Hi, Tiara. I know Tiara from outside of this, so I'm really happy to see you here. Tiara, I do have one thing to say, but I would love to hear what Eliana and Robin have to say as well. I actually would like to really, if there are allies on this call or aspiring allies on this call, I would actually like to focus on them and really have them sit in a moment of reflection, because from the work that Eliana and I got to engage in and the resource that I had the opportunity to work on with her, one of the biggest takeaways that, as she mentioned earlier in the survey, was that none of the women who responded in the survey said they didn't want anyone to just do nothing or stand by. And one of the issues I think we have seen within the past 4 years, post the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and many more people, has been that we've seen a back off of allyship behaviors where people have returned to a bystander status. So basically, people are going back into their comfort behaviors, and that's a privilege. And so I would actually say that, Tiara, just, personally knowing you, you're doing an incredible job. And also, I think that there's an opportunity for allies to step in and stand up. And when we see harm taking place, particularly directed at Black women, it's our job to say something and to step in and to call out that behavior. So if I saw that happening, if Robin saw that happening, if Eliana saw that happening, the onus would be on us. So that's one thing that I would say in response to your question, but I'm sure Robin and Eliana have other things to say too.
Yeah, I really appreciate and honor the what it takes just to say that directly, Tiara. The racial battle fatigue is so freaking painful, and it's not oftentimes just this lifetime, but it's also transmitted from previous generational experiences of racial trauma. And that gets passed down through genetic lines, and it gets passed down through family values and stories and that kind of stuff. So when you talk about these moments, or like what Lindsay was just mentioning, of like just starting to feel in the last 3 years, I imagine there could be tidal wave after tidal wave. And in the meantime, people need to just get up in the morning and go to a 9 to 5 or go to school or look for a job or whatever it is. So it's a big question, like how do we engage in racial trauma healing while we're in a repeatedly traumatizing world? And I think part of the most exciting work that I've seen on this level is being done by Dr. Resmaa Menakem, who wrote My Grandmother's Hand. He has an online virtual community called Black Octopus Society, and he trains people in the work of somatic abolitionism. What this is it's about using the body's own healing capacity through our nervous system to heal racial trauma. And I have never experienced anything like it in my life following a very, well, let me just stay focused here. What will happen is, should you decide to engage in it, or anyone else who's on this call, you can go into specific rooms or events with other people who are living in Black bodies. And Dr. Menakem refers to Black bodies, bodies of culture, white bodies, and police bodies. So this is his language. But what's so important in part is that when we engage in racial trauma healing, we want to do it in a community space that is like ourselves. Because if Black women have to be exposed to other women of color or white women at the same time, there's a very high likelihood that there could be further racialized trauma happening to the Black woman. So I think that's an important part of it. The other part of it is that Dr. Menakem talks about the wisdom that's transmitted down from previous generations, again, at a cellular level and at an interpersonal cultural level. So we are all here because there were many, many people before us who persisted, who resisted, who survived to some extent, which made us possible. So it's not just that we have that racial trauma, we also have the racial resistance and wisdom of healing. That's one thing that I would say. And I would say the other piece, if we're talking specifically about a workplace context, Dr. Carrie Yazid wrote a book called Unbreak My Soul, How Black Women Can Begin to Heal Workplace Trauma. And it is all about racial trauma and sexism and misogynoir at once. So it's a great workbook that is something that could be used on your own. And then finally, Dr. Carrie Yazid also runs these amazing exhale groups that are specifically for Black women, talking about racial trauma in the workplace.
Mm. This is Lindsay. I have a thought, but Robin, did you want to go?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we were being theoretical and practical and speaking to, I was just remembering, Terry, your question, where do we go from here? And I think it's about us as individuals and as collective people. And I'm hearing us say that it's about taking care of our individual needs as well as the policy and systemic needs. And so, finding mutual aid at work and, finding it in our lives and, making sure that we're taken care of and, can unpack and talk through the hard things and, don't feel like we have to take it on ourselves and not feel that's part of it. Dr. Menakem's work is incredible. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to go out and sign up for a thing right now, because right now we can advocate for each other. We can ally for each other without doing anything. Like, we're enough right now. We can right now support each other in relationship and with respect, and we can mess it up. And turns out we can make it better after we mess it up if we do, because it's uncomfortable. It's built in, it's intergenerational.
This is Lindsay, adding on to just some very specific examples. I would say one experience that I had just a few years ago was, I think it was soon after Breonna Taylor's murder. For whatever reason, in my very affluent neighborhood, there were all of these police cars outside in the dark. None of them have lights on. All the doors are open, and we didn't know where the police officers were. And I had loaded the kids in the car and gone to get takeout. And I get a call from my neighbor who I guess saw this happening, cis white male. And he said, I know that you're out with the kids. I don't know what the fuck's going on here, but as soon as you go, I'm standing in your front yard. When you get out, I'm going to walk you to the house. Because we didn't know what they were looking for. We didn't know who they were, blah, blah, blah. All he knew was, I'm not going to allow some moment where they're going to see some Black woman show up and they assume this isn't her very expensive house, right? So that was just, I'm going to put my body with my relationship, and my relationship is to Lindsay. And in that moment, that was the first time I had experienced something like that, where I was out. I didn't know what was going on. But for him, it was, I'm on it. I'm going to do something, right? Because he could have just watched from his blinds, right? But he was out there with his little boots on and his flashlight waiting for me when I drove up with my Indian food. Another example is Robin for Force Counts. We found ourselves in a situation where somebody we both know was trying to take my research and claim it as their own and fund off of it. And I said, Robin, you're a white woman, she's a white woman, go get my money and go get my research, right? And Robin was like, where's my bag? Where's my lipstick, right? And she came back with my money and with my research, right? So sometimes it's like, you just gotta, you know, like Robin's saying, I only get to be an ally when you choose that I get to be an ally. And in that moment, I said, I'm choosing you to play ally, and this is what it's going to look like. And Robin was like, I understand the assignment. On the other side of that, I think as women of color, as Black women, it's also how do we use our positionality and privilege at times to also advance the work. And so more recently in a client engagement, we had a situation where somebody thought they were going to open up their mouth and yell at me and accuse me of a whole bunch of things with one of my team members who is in a less senior role than me. And now, within my role, within my positionality, within my work, I have no problem standing up for myself and for my integrity. But I did not need the apology afterward. But what needed to happen was that my team member needed to see that I was going to make sure that they saw that we do not take that sort of behavior here at LTHJ Global, that we do not suffer that sort of white male anger and irrationality. And so I went through the courses because I wanted them to see that if any time this were to happen at this organization, you have my support and you will be given that apology, because this is not your past workplace. This is LTHJ Global. And I think, Amy, we've had examples of that as well, where Amy has said, Lindsay, I need you to step in and handle this conversation, right? So at times, with even in our Black bodies, even in our Black women bodies, we get to use our positionality to say, I'm going to teach the next generation that we are not repeating what our mothers and our grandmothers went through. And I will step in to make sure that you live that lesson. Is that any of that useful, Tiara?
100%. Thank you for the various examples. I appreciate it.
All right, my darlings, my friends, our community, it is, as always, a pleasure to be with you, tackling some tough conversations, getting comfortable being uncomfortable together. Let us take our grandmother's stories and weave them new for the next generation, because we all know Taylor D. Sampson, my 10-year-old, is not suffering this shit, as she told me this morning when I was trying to pack her up for school. So we got some work to do, because these little people, damn, damn, we taught them too much. Anyway, love you.